This project is part of a series in which I combine clay hand-building processes with fibre and textiles techniques. The full classroom workbook for this project is available in the video description below. Included in this workbook is the project tutorial with instructions and pictures, as well as instructions on how to make the other types of clay vessels in this fibre and clay series. In this tutorial, I'm going to use the slab technique to create this vessel. To start, I need to make a mould to build the vase onto. Fold a sheet of paper in half and sketch one side of the vase shape you'd like. It doesn't have to be exactly the shape I'm drawing, but it does need to be straight up and down or wider at the top. This is so you can pull it out of the clay at the end. So whatever shape you choose, make sure it doesn't taper inwards at the top. Cut out the template and unfold it. Now you need some light cardboard. I'm using a manila folder. The weight of the card is quite important. It needs to be around about 200 grams. This is because it needs to be heavy enough to hold the shape, but light enough to absorb the moisture from the clay and soften up so you can remove it. Trace the template onto the card and cut out 2 sheets at the same time so they're both exactly the same size. Use masking tape to stick the sides together. Don't attach the top or the bottom yet. Now scrunch up some balls of newspaper and put them into the mould. Once the base is the size and shape you'd like, you can seal up the bottom of the mould with masking tape. Cover the bottom completely so the newspaper doesn't come out. Now you need to fill the mould with newspaper. Pay attention to the corners and narrow spaces within. Here I'm making some long pieces of scrunched newspaper to put along the narrow sides. Pack it in quite tightly, but not so tightly that you change the shape of the mould. It needs to be sturdy enough to hold the weight of the clay. Then put more masking tape over the top to keep the newspaper in. For this project I'm using black mid-fire clay, which is lovely, but it can be challenging to work with because it's quite soft. If you're just starting out, I'd recommend using a paper clay as it tends to hold its shape a bit better. And by paper clay I mean the ceramic type of paper clay that you fire in a kiln like regular clay, not paper mache or paper pulp. You need 2 slabs that are large enough to cover the mould. To make the slabs the same even thickness, you can roll it between 2 props like this. Use a ruler to cut a straight line along the bottom of the slab. Now you need to trace the shape of the mould. Line the bottom of the mould along the straight bottom of the slab. Roll it to one side and trace the side. Don't cut all the way through, you're just making a mark in the clay. Then roll it to the other side and do the same. Cut the slabs a little bit larger than your traced line so you've got a bit extra to work with when you're joining the slabs. Put the cut slab on top of the other and cut it so that you have 2 slabs exactly the same size. Now you need to score and slip the sides. Use a fork or a wire tool to score all 4 side edges of the slab. Then paint on some slurry. I made this slurry by mashing some little bits of the clay into water with a fork. This step is really important because it ensures that you have a strong join that won't crack apart when it dries. Place the mould on the slab and place the other slab on top. Pinch the sides together to join it all up. Press and smooth out the joins with your fingers. Take a small slab of clay and position the base of the vase on it. Trace around the base. Then again cut it out a little bit larger. I've cut mine about 3 to 5 millimeters larger all around. Score and slip the base and the bottom of the vase, then position the vase in place. Use a smooth, flat sculpting tool to draw the excess clay around the base up the sides of the vase. You could probably use your fingers to do this, but I find a flat tool does a neater job. Perhaps a butter knife or a palette knife might be good too. Now you can trim the top of the vase. It's up to you how you'd like this to look. I'm doing a wavy top because I'll be adding the rope feature, but you might like it to be flat or some other shape. Whatever you decide, it's a good idea to sketch it first before you commit to cutting. I hope this bit is as satisfying to watch as it was to do. Next, I'm pressing some 5mm cotton sash cord to the lip of the vase. In order to make the rope look as if it's actually part of the vase, I'm pressing the side of the clay up the rope. This also creates a neat channel for the cord to sit in when I have to attach it to the vase. For this piece, I'm going to press a texture into the bottom area. For this, I'm using corrugated cardboard that I've cut in a curve to echo the wavy lines of the lip. I'm going to carefully remove the mould while the clay is still very wet. I made the slab thick enough so it should keep its shape. Ideally, I'd let it dry for a few hours so it's harder and easier to handle. But when you're working in a classroom situation, it's rare to have a few hours to spare. It's either you have no time or days in between classes. So I'm just going to try and be careful and do this while it's still very wet. Take out the newspaper first. Be careful how you hold the piece. Try not to touch the embossed texture at the base. This is where the thickness of the cardboard becomes important. Because this is thin card, it has absorbed the moisture from the clay and become softer and more flexible, and therefore easier to remove. Depending on the clay and your kiln situation, you may even be able to leave the cardboard in. But I'm going to remove it by gently twisting and wriggling until it pops out. With all the handling, I've accidentally smudged some of the texture detail, so I'm having to go back and re-etch some of the lines. Use the slurry to clean up the insides. There might be a few fibres of the cardboard left in there, but these will burn out in the kiln, so don't worry too much about that. If you're going to add the rope coiled feature, you need to add holes around the rim so that the textile feature can be attached after firing. Pierce the clay and spin and wriggle the tool to make the holes even larger. It's super important that the holes are large as the clay will shrink as it dries. if you want to use wool to wind around the top, you'll need a large needle to attach the rope, and if the holes are too small, you won't be able to thread the needle through them. So do make sure the holes are larger than you think you need, because it's very hard to make them bigger once the clay is fired. This is the finished piece. To achieve this look, I bisque fired the clay, then added some clear gloss glaze only to the area that I pressed the corrugated card. The rest I left unglazed. Then I fired it again to a stoneware glaze temperature. To learn how to add the rope coiled feature, you can check out my pinch pot video, which includes the full instructions, as does my video on rope coiling, or you can have a look at the workbook. I've put the links down in the video description.